A week ago, the UK experienced 2 days of hot weather. The record temperatures are measured in cities and airfields, which are subject to the urban heat island effect, and therefore much warmer than the surroundings. My previous video, 40C Fake Alarmism, dealt with this to expose the lack of validity in linking 2 days of hot weather to man-made climate change. This video is about the BBC and UK Met Office response to such criticism. So let us first take a look at what the BBC and the Met Office were claiming at that time.
Say that the record temperatures in Europe over the last few weeks would not have been possible without man-made climate change.
Of course, just ignoring the fact that 111 years ago, in 1911, we had a proper heat wave, much longer and just as hot, with similar temperatures in London. And in addition, over 40,000 people died in France as a result of that heat wave.
Global team that included experts from Imperial College London and the Met Office have been running complex weather models since then to establish the extent to which greenhouse gas emissions made the heat wave worse.
After a lot of criticism about the stance of the BBC and the Met Office, their reaction was this. Matt Taylor, the BBC meteorologist, quote, "I have never experienced anything like it in nearly 25 years of working in weather." And the Royal Meteorological Society condemned the trolling on the internet from people like me. Most of the abuse seems to have been prompted as links that were made between the heat wave and climate change. Well, quite correct, because as you've just seen, that's exactly what they were doing. But the BBC and the Met Office do not even understand what a heat wave is. How can I say that? Well, very simply, the heat wave is defined by the World Meteorological Organization, and here is the definition. Well, the World Meteorological Organization defines a heat wave as 5 or more consecutive days during which the daily maximum temperature surpasses the average maximum temperature by 5 degrees centigrade or 9 degrees Fahrenheit or more. So those few days a week or so ago were not even a heat wave by meteorologists' own definition. But that doesn't stop them totally misusing it to cause alarm. Well, the very month that Matt Taylor was born, June 1976, was the start of the 1976 heat wave. But that was a heat wave. Well, first of all, why was that a heat wave and the last few hot days not a heat wave? Well, it lasted for 15 days, not 2. The heat was there for over 2 months and caused a major drought. I should know about it because I was the water resource engineer for Wales at that time in that drought. You cannot use temperature data from huge conurbations such as London or airports. And the 40C, as you can see here on that Tuesday, was measured at Heathrow Airport. The Met Office lead meteorologist, Alex Deacon, said, and I quote, "It's scary in some ways," adding, "I find it more frustrating and offensive for my colleagues, some of the great minds in climate science. Show a bit of respect and do a little more research rather than just believe Bob down the pub or Tony on YouTube." I think the Tony on YouTube they refer to is Tony Heller, who probably has the best skepticism site on the internet. Well worth taking a look at, but they refuse to debate him. What Alex Deacon said there was not science. What matters is not who you are, how high you are. What matters is the truth of what you're saying. Science is not immune from legitimate challenges. Here's the thing. Science not only can be challenged, but it is challenged all the time. Most often by the mainstream scientists who study that particular field. Science not only accepts these challenges, but thrives on them. And of course, challenges often come from outside the mainstream. Einstein was a patent clerk when he produced his theory of relativity. Every climate alarmist prediction to date has been wrong. Their models are wrong and running far too hot. Richard Feynman put this very well. It doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. Well, we really need to ask ourselves why a climate alarmist industry is wrong. What is the problem? They won't debate. They just lay it down. In this case, they say, within hours, they run a marvellous, super advanced model that showed that the temperature in an airport, Heathrow Airport, on that day was a clear sign of man-made climate change. That is ridiculous by any scientific or rational standard. And I suppose the reason they're carrying on with this now is well put in this quotation here. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his job depends on not understanding it. I could not resist showing you the short clip from GB News demonstrating the total ignorance of what science is and how it works, but also exposing the biasness of the BBC.
A construct of the elite. I've said it before, I'll say it again, there isn't a climate emergency. Brian Catt, who's pretty learned and qualified to talk about this, can give you all the information, fundamental, simple points. Number one, CO2 doesn't drive the climate. Number two, it is a mechanism to, I think, control us and to try and cause all kinds of authoritarian implementations. And number three, we're wrecking our economy when even if everything I've said is completely wrong, adaptation is cheaper than the ludicrous idea that we can stop climate change, which has been going on for billions of years.
He is right, of course. There has always been natural climate change. There always will be, but the IPCC only study man-made climate change and assume all change is due to mankind. But without knowing what is natural climate change, you cannot know the change caused by mankind. Also, even if the alarmists were right, mitigation methods would be far less expensive than current green policies.
In fact, how arrogant is it for humans to think that we can stop it?
I mean, Matt, this is the thing. I mean, it's not an isolated thing. This is a global thing that's happening, isn't it? I mean, you've got the Dutch farmers saying that actually this whole drive to net zero is destroying their business. They're like the second biggest agricultural providers in Europe. You've got other countries. You had Sri Lanka attempting to make an environmental zone, and in the end, the people couldn't stand it. They couldn't stomach it, and they sort of trounced the palace. And, you know, this is not, you know, it seems to be we've all gone along with this, but there comes a point where it's starting to affect people. What do you think?
But there is an argument for national TV shows not to give platforms to climate change deniers. So, for example, the BBC won't do that. Let me give you.
No one's denying that the climate is changing. Right. We're just saying that is. Right. See, that's the thing. So let's just get the.
Well, man-made climate change. Okay. Fine. So there's an argument. Let me make my point. There's a good, strong argument. I think the BBC is right in this, in not giving a platform to people who go against the overwhelming scientific consensus.
That is so wrong. Science does not work on consensus. If it did, then we would not have things like GPS, or we would not know about the Big Bang. We'd still be living in what we thought was a steady-state universe. There are so many examples right throughout science. In fact, science is an ever-changing, ever-evolving quest to find out how the world works. And what you cannot do is stop discussion and stop debate. The arrogance of this is unbelievable, and it makes it not science.
You'll have a chance to come back on that. I do basically agree with that with the national broadcaster, but I'm happy to come on a show like this.
The BBC, of course, have no right whatsoever to take a single scientific position and then impose it on the public. For a national broadcaster to do this is, well, it's corrupt.
It's to take on views that are aired by Lembit and to try my very best to convince our viewers, your viewers, that Lembit is wrong. I feel a little bit like we're on the Titanic and I'm now on the top bit, the really highest bit above water, and I've got Lembit sitting next to me saying, well, we're not really sinking, are we? Because we're actually higher now than we were before. So the science is clear. The science is very clear. I can't give you a graph because the camera won't zoom in quickly enough.
Well, he can't, but I can. Here's a graph of the average of the models there in red and the reality in blue. All the models are way over the top in forecasting temperature rises. Basically, all the models do not agree with the observations and are therefore wrong. This graph shows the historic temperatures that everyone agreed on before 1999. After that, historically, they changed all the data. But this was a worldwide phenomenon. I know here it's just the USA. But it's actually worldwide. The 1930s were much hotter than we have today. But it had to be done away with because, of course, in the 1930s we had very low levels of CO2. I have done a whole video on this subject.
But I really beseech everyone, after they've finished watching your show, just go and do some basic research, which will show you that of the last 25 years or so, almost every single one of those years has been hotter than the last, has been going up. Almost every single one of those years is way hotter than it was before we introduced the sort of infrastructure and industry that creates carbon dioxide emissions.
I'm going to end this video with a quote from Cheryl Jacobs in the Daily Telegraph. "The emperor has no clothes. The establishment simply has no message for voters in the face of hardship. The only vision for the future it conjures up is net zero, a dystopian agenda that takes the sacrificial politics of austerity and financialization of the world's economy to new heights. Actively campaigning for boiler bans, 15 miles per hour speed limits, and speculative green bubbles may seem like madness, but it is a perfectly logical program for an elite that has become unhinged from the real world.